Every June, something interesting happens. Offices put up rainbow flags, LinkedIn turn into a festival of inclusion posts. Companies change their logo, HR sends out a Pride Month email. There are webinars, there are panels, there are carefully worded statements about how everyone is welcome here. Everyone belongs here, everyone can bring their whole self to work. And then, Monday morning happens. And someone sits in a meeting and doesn't say what they actually think. And someone smiles through a feedback that quietly humiliated them. And someone eats lunch alone, performing okayness, because somewhere along the way they learn that being real has a cost. Welcome to Relationship Ironies of the world we live in. I'm Swati Mukherjee. I'm a relationship coach and a corporate trainer. And today, we're going to talk about the biggest irony of Pride Month. And honestly, one of the biggest ironies of modern professional life. We have never talked more about inclusion, and people have never felt more alone at work. Before I get into the stories, and I have 3 that are going to stay with you, I want to name the irony properly, because the word gets thrown around and I don't just want to use it, I want you to feel it. Pride Month began as a protest. It was about people who had been told their very existence was something to hide, demanding the right to be seen. That is the root of it all. Visibility, safety, the right to exist without pretending. Fast forward to 2026. Research published just this month showed that nearly 4 in 10 LGBTQ plus employees still feel the need to hide their identity at work. Nearly a third say they cannot truly be themselves in their workplace. And these are just the employees in organizations that have the rainbow flag up. But here's where I want to stretch this conversation, because as a relationship coach and someone who spent over a decade in HR, I know this isn't only an LGBTQ plus story. It's a human story. Because the hiding isn't limited to sexuality or identity. I've sat with people, senior people, successful people, people you would look at and call thriving, who are hiding their exhaustion, their loneliness, the fact that their marriage is quietly falling apart. The fact that they disagree with the direction their team is going. The fact that they haven't felt like themselves in years. And the irony, the deep, almost painful irony, is the organizations that shout the loudest about bringing your whole self to work are often the same ones where people feel most pressured to perform a version of themselves that is acceptable. The flag goes up, the hiding continues. That's what this episode is about. I want to start with a story about a woman I worked with. Let's call her Asha. Asha was the senior HR business partner at a large financial service firm. When I met her, she was running their entire inclusion and diversity initiative. She had built the framework, she had written the strategy, she was the person other HR leaders came to for advice on psychological safety. She was also privately completely unable to tell her husband what she needed. I was brought in by her organization to run a workshop on relational dynamics in leadership. She stayed back after, and what she said to me has never left me. She said, Swati, I spend my entire day creating environments where people feel safe to be vulnerable, and I go home and I can't tell my husband I'm drowning. I asked, why? She said, because at home, showing need feels like a weakness. At work, I can talk about vulnerability in theory. At home, it's just exposing. And this is the first irony I want you to sit with. Asha was the architect of Psychological safety for an entire organization. She genuinely believed in it. She was good at building it for other people. But the same internal rules she was trying to dismantle in her workplace. Don't show weakness, manage how you're perceived, don't be too much, were running her marriage unchecked. Her husband wasn't a bad man. He wasn't cold. He was actually, from what she described, someone who would have wanted to support her. But she had learned so early that need was dangerous, that she'd built a life where she never expressed it. She'd become expert at appearing fine. And their relationship was suffering the particular kind of death that happens not through conflict, but through distance. Not fighting, just two people becoming increasingly separate while sharing the same space. When I asked Asha what she was most afraid of, if she told him the truth, she paused for a very long time. And then she said, "It would change how he sees me." There it is. The same fear that makes an employee not raise their hand in a meeting. The same fear that makes a team member not flag a problem until it's too late. The same fear that makes a gay employee not mention their partner's name in a casual conversation. The fear that being real will cost them belonging. Asha's story taught me something I now say to every corporate client I work with. You cannot build psychological safety in your organization if you haven't looked at where you don't have it in your own life. Safety isn't a policy, it's a pattern, and we bring our patterns everywhere. I want to pause here and be direct about Pride Month because I think it deserves more than a paragraph in a speech. Pride Month matters, not as a marketing moment, as a reminder that the cost of hiding is not abstract. For LGBTQ plus people, hiding has historically meant survival. It has meant violence, loss of family, loss of employment, loss of the right to love who you love without consequences. That still is happening in 2026 in offices with rainbow flags in the window. And that's what I want to bring to this conversation as someone who works at the intersection of corporate dynamics and personal relationships, that the same dynamics that makes a gay employee edit their pronouns out of a conversation, the same dynamic that makes a trans colleague not mention their weekend because they don't know how it'll land. That same dynamic is also making your straight, cisgender, apparently successful colleague hide their struggling marriage. It's making your highest performer hide their burnout. It's making your most senior leader hide the fact that they have no idea what they're doing. Psychological safety, or the lack thereof it, is not selective. When a culture is unsafe for someone, it becomes unsafe for everyone, just in different ways, different costs. The Pride Month is an invitation, not just to celebrate, to examine the environments we are creating at work, at home, in our relationships, and to ask who is hiding around me and what have I done or not done that taught them that it was safer to. Second story. I was brought into an organization, a mid-sized tech company, because they were hemorrhaging talent. Good people, high performers, leaving without much explanation. Exit interviews were clean, no one was naming a specific issue, but people were just going. The leadership team was baffled. They'd invested heavily in culture, mental health days, flexible working, DEI training, the works. And the managing director, James, was by every external measure a good leader. Engaged, well-liked, open door policy. He said it in every team meeting. My door is always open. When I started doing my diagnostic conversations, which are essentially structured conversations where I speak to people across levels, the pattern that emerged was sharp. Nobody trusted the open door. Not because James was cruel, not because he'd ever punished someone for raising something, but because of something subtler, something relational. Anytime someone brought a problem, James solved it immediately. He'd step in, take over, fix it, and move on. Efficiently, decisively. And the message people received, not the message he intended, but the message they received was your problems are something to be resolved, not explode. There's no space here to not know the answers. There's no space here to sit in uncertainty and be supported through it. So people stopped bringing problems. They stopped bringing half-formed ideas. They stopped bringing the messy, uncertain human stuff that is actually how good work gets done. They performed competence completely, exhaustingly. And one by one, the ones with enough options elsewhere decided the performance cost was too high. Now, here's where it connects to Pride Month. When I asked James in our one-to-one conversation whether he found it easy to ask for help, he laughed. Not the easy laugh, the one that means the question landed. He said, I don't really do that. I asked him why. And he said, and this is almost verbatim, because I'm the person people come to. I can't be the one who doesn't know. The man had been performing certainty his entire career. And he'd built a team in his own image, where uncertainty was something you managed privately, not something you shared. His open door was real, his intention was genuine, but his relational pattern, the one that said, need is weakness, uncertainty is a threat, asking for help is loss of standing. That pattern had shaped the entire culture. And nobody was coming through that door. What James needed wasn't a new policy. He needed to do what Pride Month asks of all of us. To examine what parts of himself he had decided weren't safe to show. And what that decision was costing the people around him. Third story. And this one is closer to home. I worked with a couple, Daniel and Nadia, high earners, both of them. 2 kids, good life from the outside. They came to me because they were, in Nadia's words, fine but disconnected. Fine but disconnected. And I hear that more than almost anything else. When I worked with them, what emerged was a pattern I see in high-achieving couples constantly. They had both become so good at performing well-being that they had lost the ability to signal distress to each other. Daniel had learned from his family and then from years in a senior corporate role that his job was to hold things together, to be steady, to not add to the weight. And when he was struggling, he didn't say so. He went quieter, he worked later, he exercised more. These were his signals. Nadia didn't read them as signals, she read them as preference. Nadia had learned that expressing need led to feeling like a burden. So when she was struggling, she also went quiet, competent, self-managing. 2 people, completely alone together. And here's where the irony that nearly broke my heart in the session. They had been to a Pride event together the previous year. They believed deeply in inclusion and creating space for people to be themselves. They had had conversations with their kids about how important it is to let people be who they are. And they could not do it with each other. The values were right, the philosophy was right, the capacity in their own relationship, in their own house wasn't there. Because safety isn't a value you hold, it's a skill you practice. And most of us were never taught how. Daniel and Nadia are doing better now. Not because they found the right words, because they started learning how to tolerate each other's reality without immediately trying to fix it, perform around it, or protect each other from it. They learned to stay. That's what psychological safety actually is, by the way. Not the absence of conflict, the presence of people who stay when things get real. So let me name the irony of this episode clearly, because that's what this episode is built on. We live in a world that has never spoken more about inclusion, authenticity, psychological safety, belonging. We have frameworks for it. We have training days for it. We have entire job titles dedicated to it. And people are lonelier, more hidden, and more exhausted from performing okayness than perhaps any generation before us. The rainbow flag goes up, the hiding continues. The open door policy gets announced, nobody walks through. Daniel and Nadia say, I love you every night, and neither of them has told the truth in months. This is not a failure of intention. Almost everyone I work with has good intentions. It's a failure of pattern, of the relational habits we built early, carried through life, and never examined. And Pride Month, at its deepest level beneath the politics and the logos and the social media posts, Pride Month is asking us to examine the pattern. To ask, what are you hiding? And what did you learn that made hiding feel safer than being seen? I want to leave you with something before I let you go. The people in these stories, Asha, James, Daniel, Nadia, none of them were broken. None of them were unusual. They were doing what most of us do. They were managing how they were perceived. They were protecting themselves from the cost of being real. And all of them, when they finally stopped, when they found a space where the hiding was necessary, all of them said some version of the same thing. I didn't realize how much energy that was taking. You might be spending energy right now that you don't even know you're spending. This Pride Month, I'm not asking you to march or post or change your logo. I'm asking you to do something harder. Look at your closest relationships, personal or professional, and ask yourself honestly, does this person feel safe being real with me? And do I feel safe being real with them? If the answer is no, or I'm not sure, then it's worth paying attention to. If you want to go deeper on this work, whether your relationship, your leadership, your team culture, you can find me at coachswatimukherjee.com. I work with couples, with leaders, with organizations who are ready to move past the performance and build something that actually holds. If this episode landed for you, share it. Not because of the numbers, but because someone in your network is probably sitting with exactly what we talked about today and doesn't have the language for it. Give them this. I'll see you next week. I'm Swati Mukherjee, and this is Relationship Ironies of the World We Live In.